different. It was, yeah, so I just need
Logical problems, aren't they? Oh, right. Just a coincidence that they were both having a problem. Yeah. And then it was kind of weird that the screen said that it was still live streaming. That wasn't. Not helpful. Yeah, right. Okay.
Thanks, Marie.
Benita, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Perfect. Winner.
Yeah. All right, we'll get underway. 10:40. Oh. Welcome everybody, and we're going to dive straight into it. With the confirmation of any apologies.
Right. So we've got council.
Sure. Any other apologies? Move those. Could I have a signature, please, for the apologies? Thank you, Charlotte. Again. Yep, got it. Yep, thank you. Okay, moving on. Confirmation of minutes from the 23rd July Policy and Planning meeting. Recommendations on page 3. You'll move, Susan. Thank you, Donna. Seconding. Any comments?
It's just a question
Yes.
about how we're going with the conflict of interest material that had to be submitted.
Which page were you on?
It's item number.
Yep. So there's final draft letters ready to go to OAG's office. I'm seeking that.
Okay. All right. We have the recommendations. They are taken as minutes are taken as read. Move it. Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, none. Moving on to item number 4, freshwater implementation update for August.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a comment, please. My diligent is playing at the moment, and I've been advised that it's unable to be fixed today. So I'll just wing it.
Very good.
If I may,
Yes.
Did you receive the PDF version of the minutes of the agenda by email?
And if not, there will be. Peter, there will.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you do. There is also. You can also follow them online too. There's a PDF link there. Yes.
Double signing and also.
Okay. Noted. I will contact Diligent.
Well, what about
Just on Diligent, you have to sign in now with your email address. For those of us on the computer, it's your council one. And I had to reset my password to get it going.
Yeah, I got it.
Or a retractor.
Anyway, moving on.
Well, I'm just wondering if Mr. Chair, if we move people around, then we can share a screen. Necessary?
Ideally, they should be able to find a
Really
PDF
swap.
version.
Yeah, if you come and share with me, and then
Yeah.
Peter can share with Donna.
I should be able to.
Alan, if you go to the TRC website, there's a PDF copy there. Okay. Please.
More than all. This is our standing freshwater implementation update to you all, a noting paper reflecting on what we've been up to the last 6 weeks in the freshwater space and what we're looking ahead to do. I'll take it as noted, but there's probably just a couple of things I thought worthwhile flagging your attention on. Obviously, since the last time we met, probably the main milestone that's been completed is our consultation on the freshwater plan, on the draft target setting, and the management options is concluded. So there's a whole, excuse me, there's a whole summary in the report under paragraph 8 of kind of, I guess, some of the key statistics from that consultation. So really well turned out consultation, had over 549 people attending community sessions. We ended up having 230 completed surveys, 22 bespoke submissions, and obviously all of those community roadshows generated a whole heap of feedback and dot points and sticky notes and all the rest of it. So the team at the moment are very busily working through all of that work. We will bring back to you at your next meeting in October an analysis document that pulls together everything that's been said. That'll be structured topic by topic, question by question, so it'll be a really in-depth summary, I guess, or analysis of the key themes that have been raised through the consultation, as well as at the end we'll have some, I guess, high-level kind of next steps about some of the things that we as staff feel we need to then do to progress that feedback that we've received from the community. I've also included in the memo just some high-level themes, I guess, that have kind of come across all of those topics that we consulted on. And that's on paragraph 11. So things like timeframes to make improvements. There was general commentary from the community around the acknowledgement that seeing improvement in water quality and quantity is going to take time. So that most of those targets that we'd actually set were 30 years beyond, but there was some feedback from people expressing that it will take at least that to see some of the improvements we're wishing to seek. Equally, some considered that the generational to be too long for that change to occur. A call, I guess, for us to start thinking about how the different character of our rivers and streams play out as we develop the policy framework. Some commentary around our monitoring site and data availability, just flagging where we might have some gaps as council about future monitoring that we need to address going forward. There was concerns also expressed about council continuing on with its plan making process, given the government's looking at RM reforms, and particularly the reforms they've signalled in the freshwater space. So that commentary came through quite clearly across all of the consultation. Climate change as well, some commentary around a desire to see climate change impacts assessed across all of our management options and attributes. We had done that, but it was probably sitting in our tech report. So that's probably a note to staff about bringing some of that stuff more to the fore. But also just some concerns around some of the existing land uses in Taranaki might be continuing to embed some practices that will cause us continued concern in the climate change space going forward. And then just a reminder, I guess, from a few of the respondents around that the outcomes we're seeking for freshwater health have impact on the health and wellbeing of our broader community as well. So we're not just looking and thinking about this through the lens of water quality and quantity. So that's a bit of an overview, I guess, of those high level kind of feedback that's come through. But as I said, the report that we'll bring to you next time will be topic by topic. And then the other part of the report I've got in front of you is just a bit of an update as to where government direction is at relating to freshwater. There's a whole heap there, but I think the one I'll just draw your attention to is the government has continued to confirm that they are looking at the freshwater reform space. They have now set out a bit of a timeline as to how they're going to be doing that. And they've indicated that early 2025, they'll be releasing a very significant package on national direction. So it's not just going to be covering freshwater, it will cover everything that the national policy statements currently cover, as well as potentially some new topics requiring national direction. So we will expect to see what that looks like, I guess, in early 2025. We're just monitoring all of that at the moment in terms of what that might mean for our program. And when we get a little bit more detail from government, and if we feel that that needs a decision from you all, we'll bring it back to you in terms of implications on our program.
Are you getting the feeling that's continuity? I mean, that's not far away, obviously. Early 2025, we're not going back to square one, are we? It's going to be more.
It's hard to say at the moment. We haven't had a lot of direction, I guess, as to the contact the government are thinking of at the moment. I mean, it's fair to say that's a really ambitious program of work that they do have on their plate. So I think, starting again is probably unreasonable, but there will be some key elements, I suppose, that I suspect we probably will see some pretty significant change from what's out there at the moment. But as I said, we haven't really seen any direction as to what that looks like yet. MFE are turning their minds to that policy development at the moment, and they're going to be doing that over the remainder of this year. So we may get more engagement, I guess, as a regional sector in that space before that public release next year.
The only constant is change.
Yes.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions or queries.
Just a brief comment on the consultation. We've talked about it before, but great wishes. Obviously, on the consultation, all the feedback that we've had was that went really well and great publicity, and do some good stuff with all the information that we've gathered in that process. Councillor Walker.
Actually, congratulate you on the whole process, because I think I was just quoted at the start about how it was to be, but the most important thing was to get involvement for as many people as they could, so that later we won't have people saying to us, well, we didn't get an opportunity, we didn't know, all that stuff. The fact is they had very many opportunities, and not only did they have the opportunity to go, but the way you dealt with it by having posters around the wall and talking to staff and so forth. If they had a point to make, they had the chance to make it. So nobody is going to have to come back to us and say, I didn't know, I couldn't go, all that. And that's really great. That's what we wanted to get buy-in for.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, just second what Neil said. Really well done on the process. That's the best consultation I've seen ever. But I guess I'm just concerned about the timeline and with the government changes. Is there any way we can speed up the timeline and I guess get in before they change the laws, or is that impossible?
We are working towards a timeline at the moment based on a notification, I guess, middle of next year. So that will be before, I guess, a final MPS, new MPS would land by the government. They've kind of signalled that will be around about that time. So I don't think we probably can fasten our program at the moment. There's just a lot of work to be done. The benefit of having such a successful consultation is there's a lot of information we're now working through, and there's been really high quality information that's really given us some food for thought on how we approach some things going forward, and some refinement of what we were thinking, as well as potentially some more science investigations on some areas where we need to do a little bit more work. So that will take time. So yeah, I don't think we can actually speed up that process ahead of what the government's set out at this point in time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only other point to note, of course, is that we would still have to give effect to the new NPS albeit by December 27, under the current construct as we understand at the moment. So even if, and you've got a whole hearings panel process to go through anyway, so even if we did do that, we'd still have to change it, start to immediately change it again before December 27 anyway. So at best, it will probably apply for 6 to 12 months, I suspect.
Mine was just an acknowledgement, it was an acknowledgement to the staff as well, the consultation, and how it was even positive up to about we were up to the 20th or the 21st or something, and I was at one of the last ones, and everyone was still just enthusiastic and really positive. It was amazing. Everyone was amazing, I think.
Thank you. I don't see more questions. So we are just receiving that report. Over move it, please. Thank you. And second Moving on, item number 5, we have the Can I Swim report card. Today, swim.
I'll just ask our water quality scientist and our lead for our Can I Swim Here program, Angela Collins, to join us and take us through the report briefly for your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just also want to take a quick minute just to acknowledge Amy, who's sitting here in the corner. She's our science communicator at TRC, and she's the one that's pulled most of this report card together. So thank you, Amy. So every summer between November and March, we work closely with the 3 district councils and Te Whatu Ora to monitor and advise the public on water quality at 41 lakes, rivers, beach sites across the region. This monitoring is a requirement of councils across the country, and it's delivered as the Can I Swim Here program. At freshwater sites, we test for the fecal indicator bacteria E. coli, and at marine sites, we test for enterococci. We also monitor for cyanobacteria or potentially toxic algae, which can present as either planktonic, which is floating in lakes, or benthic in rivers where it forms thick, dark mats on riverbeds. These results are assessed against national guidelines, which follow a traffic light style risk model, where green means the water quality is suitable for swimming, amber means that caution is advised, and red means water quality is unsuitable for swimming. The annual report card that you have in front of you presents the most recent results from the 2023-2024 monitoring season. At freshwater sites, 47% of routine samples indicated water quality was suitable for swimming, while 21% of samples were at caution advised level, and 32% of samples indicated conditions were unsuitable for swimming at the time of sampling. Lakes Hirangawa and Lake Rotarangi at the Patia Dam had the lowest levels of E. coli throughout the season, while the Tehanui stream had the poorest water quality and has permanent health warnings remaining in place. In terms of long-term grades, which are calculated in accordance with the MPSFN and national guidelines, 2 of 23 monitored freshwater sites were graded excellent, and that is Lake Rotarangi and Lake Hirangawa, while remaining 21 sites were graded as poor. At the marine or beach sites, 83% of routine samples indicated that water quality was suitable for swimming at the time of sampling. 7% of samples were at caution advised level, and 10% of samples indicated conditions were unsuitable for swimming at the time of sampling. Fitzroy Beach has the best water quality of all monitored beaches this season, followed closely by Okura Beach opposite the campground and Middleton Bay in Opanaki. Waitara East and Waitara West beaches were unsuitable for swimming the most often throughout the season. In terms of long-term grades, 6 marine sites were graded fair, while the remaining 12 sites have been graded poor. Of the 21 weekly sampling runs, it should be noted that 13 weeks or 62% of these runs were affected by heavy rainfall, either during or in the days leading up to sampling. So the results from this season again show that water quality is generally better at our beaches than in our rivers, and show the impact that rainfall has on water quality across the region. For benthic cyanobacteria in rivers, 26% of surveys found that the monitored rivers were suitable for recreational use. They reached cautionary guidelines during one survey and were deemed unsuitable for recreation during 73% of surveys. And generally, this was due to exposed mats of cyanobacteria along the river's edge. In lakes, planktonic cyanobacteria levels were suitable for recreational use 80% of the time, elevated to cautionary levels 12% of the time, and 8% of results indicated conditions were unsuitable for swimming at the time of sampling. In terms of long-term grades for planktonic cyanobacteria, 4 of the 7 lakes were graded excellent, while the remaining were graded poor. Annual monitoring for Can I Swim Here is due to kick off again in early November, and again we will be publishing results via the LAWA website. And I will take the rest as read and open for questions.
Thank you. Questions, Donald?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Do we note anywhere when you take a sample the weather conditions, or has it been raining in the last 3 days, etc., to quantify some of the samples quality we're getting?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, we do take note. We have a sort
but
of...
it's not publicised per se.
Not publicised per se, so it is communicated whether it's rainfall affected to the district health boards in Te Whatu Ora, and that sort of determines whether we do follow-up sampling. If we were to get high results or experiences during fine weather, we would see that as a concern. We would go back and follow up and investigate more. But typically, if we've had really heavy rainfall and we get an exceedance, we would expect that sort of result. So we don't do a follow up.
Charlotte.
Thanks for the information. On the cyanobacteria, has that increased a lot this year? Because I don't recall, say, for example, at Maryland's Domain and Meeting of Water seeing such high levels, and just conscious of how many people's dogs go out there and how toxic that is for them as well as humans. So is there been a marked increase this year, or is that a long run trend I've just missed?
I might field that one to Brooke if that's okay, because I know Brooke's our cyano whiz.
So as Anne mentioned, a lot of those exceedances were due to exposed mats. So in stream, we might get low coverage, but because there's an exposed mat, that immediately puts it into the red alert level. And those exposed mats can be fresh and dark and green, or they can occasionally become dried out. But because we're seeing them, we have to mark it as exposed, and then it triggers that alert level. So for this next monitoring season, we'll be following up on that and reviewing what we're doing in terms of our recording of exposed mats, and we're looking into getting some toxin testing done of those mats that we're finding at the stream edge as well, just to determine whether or not they pose that risk with the toxin content within the mat.
Okay.
Because obviously if the toxins were high, could we get somebody to put up signs warning dog owners, etc., etc.? Be a good idea. Yes.
Do you ever consider signing the mouth of the Tianui with a warning that people should not be feeding the ducks? Because I mean, I obviously see people there all the time, Nana and Grandad and assembled others, with large bags of bread, and it floats on the water and makes it revolting. And I'm confident that the excrement that the ducks, the happy bread-fed ducks produce, really compromises the water quality at the mouth of the river, which would otherwise be an ideal site for small children to be enjoying the water in. So have you ever actually contemplated telling people that by feeding the ducks, you are adversely affecting the quality of the water and risking the health of your children and grandchildren?
Through you, Chair, that hasn't been on our radar of something that we would communicate, but we can certainly take that on board and have a think about
you should do it.
Civil unrest would ensue.
Is that something that we could or should do, or is that something we'd encourage district council to do?
I don't think that people understand the consequences of feeding the ducks.
I think there's some messaging around the causes at particular sites that we can definitely provide some community education around.
Through you, Chair, sorry, just on that matter, I know for that site, it does talk about where the water quality, is due to birds at that particular site, especially on Lawa, but yeah, not 100% on what's at the site itself. Yeah, good feedback.
But as I say, I'm sure Nan and Brad don't want to see Jeremy and Jemima really poorly from ingesting crappy water when they go paddling. So if they were actually told this is undesirable and this is the potential consequence, I'm sure that some of them at least would stop.
Bonita's had her hand up for a wee while. Bonita?
Kia ora, can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Kia ora koutou. Great report. Disheartening report at the same time, especially for those of us in South Taranaki who know that the Kaupukunui River in just west of Manaia and the Wangangoro River at Ohawi Beach, where Selene hangs out a lot, feature with really strong red bands, and that's not the gumboots either. And they're really popular swimming spots, and people don't take any notice of the signs. They don't understand the issues. Is there any plan to address those? How are we going to fix up those really, really popular spots? And is there any targeting of information and education in those specific communities around the risks of still going in the water when they're not swimmable. I mean, I grew up at the Kopukanui River, and it still runs pretty green sometimes, and the bottom of the river is still pretty slimy and icky. So, you know, there are people down there all the time.
Yes, so the education campaign part of the program is always something that can be challenging in terms of encouraging people to not swim at particular times. It's you can put the messaging out there and put an awful lot of resource into it. People will still make the choices that they make. That said, we can certainly have a think about how we frame that this year and what resource we put into those particular areas that are more susceptible to contamination, and including at times when perhaps the river flows aren't necessarily that high. So where those risks are high during conditions that would be suitable and where we consider suitable for swimming, they're the places that we really do want to put a lot of energy and attention. One of the things that we do need to have a look at is signage that is up at those sites. But signs are tricky. People walk past them. They don't necessarily look at them either. So we'll have a think about what more we can do. Often through summer, as we're heading into the season, we'll jump on the radio and do some interviews and various bits and pieces to try and raise awareness. But yeah, happy to take on board any ideas that people have for the particular communities around what might engage them best. But we'll certainly have a think about that as we get into the program.
Yes, I don't know the answer, but I do think signs are problematic, that you stop seeing the signs after a while, especially if the sign is always on red, people stop seeing them. They make their own judgment calls. So I think perhaps the education needs to go towards make your own judgment call, especially if it's been raining, if it hasn't been raining, depending on.
Through you, Chair, thank you for the report. I was a little bit curious, would it be possible to have a report that showed past history of what was in the rivers to give us a bit of a trend, like for the previous 5 years, and how each river is progressing? So are we improving that quality, getting more swimmable days, or are we going back the other way? It'd be nice for me, I think, to have a bit of a trend to it. As you say, if we had an adverse weather condition that affected the samples, we'd see that in a spike in the flow of it. I think it might give us some context, or then say, well, this is trending down. Why is it? Those sorts of things for me could be advantageous.
We can certainly put some context around the history. It'll vary year on year depending on the weather. It's very weather dependent. We've only got 3 years of sampling on weather conditions at the moment, so we'll need to build that data series up before we can do that justice. We usually recommend at least 5 years of data before that, but we can certainly think about that as we move forward with the program.
I'll look forward to it in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could just add on to that, I guess this particular reporting format is one of our report card style SOE reports that we've sort of just got underway recently, and I guess we're trying to find the right balance of information that we're including in these particular forms of reporting, noting that we're looking to re-establish our technical reporting series as well, where we can dive into a little bit more detail in terms of trends and some of those, I guess, some of that additional information around possible drivers and patterns of cause and effect and things like that. But absolutely keen for feedback in terms of how you see the information that's been packaged up in this report, whether it needs a little more context, or happy to take feedback on that.
Great, thank you.
Through you, Chair, the way this report is put together, it's nice and simple, and I can understand it, and it's very graphic in what it is. So I do appreciate that part of it. It's just the history part of it would be nice to have as well.
So there you go. Even Alan can understand it.
That's right. Thank you. Run it past people. Need to.
Emily.
Yeah, thank you for the report. It was very enlightening, and some terrible news. But it's good to have the facts in front of us, so we know what we're dealing with. And we'll feed into all the other work. Just on the ducks, just wanted to note that there's actually a duck down there that has this thing called It's called angel wing. So when you feed ducks when they're young, their wings don't develop and they can't fly. And so when you feed them bread, they're young. So it's actually harmful to the wildlife, which could be another way to get the messaging out. Just on the cyanobacteria, could you just clarify? So you're saying that the method has changed, and that's why the numbers have gone up?
The method hasn't changed, but we will seeing more of the exposed mats at the edge of the stream than perhaps we had done in previous years, and that's likely related to lower flows and dry conditions.
And then just on the other comment around the communication, something I've noticed with the school communities is that they'll often have like trips to the beach at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year in summer. And I get in there and try and go, if it was raining heavily last night, we shouldn't really go, but they don't really listen. So if we could have sort of targeted comms going out to schools in December, February, and also like campgrounds. Because like a lot of the campgrounds are the popular swimming places, if they could actually put out a sign themselves, people might take more notice of this on there.
Yeah, happy to take those suggestions on board.
Yeah, I was going to say through you, Chair, I actually had calls from several schools throughout the season as well. So they'll ring front desk and get put through and ask for advice on whether they think it would be suitable. So,
it's far easier to educate young people than it is to re-educate.
You suggesting you can't teach old dogs new tricks?
Perhaps. Okay, yes. Well, Benita's suggesting letterbox drops in local communities, advertisements, and community newspapers. There are only left. Noting that North Taranaki midweek doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if this is South Taranaki midweek. And radio, bilingual flyers, schools, etc., stuff for kids to take home. Yes.
I've got a question around the methodology of the testing. So, if the conditions and the rainfall have such a large effect on the testing, why aren't we endeavouring to test the rivers on both a good day and a bad day and comparing that data, bearing in mind that I'm not a scientist? So, I mean, it's obviously skewing the results as soon as the weather's bad.
through you, Chair, sorry. So we just take the samples every Tuesday routinely. So we know that people in Taranaki, they use the water, whether it's fine, whether it's wet. So it used to be that we had fine weather monitoring. We've now moved to what the national standard is for water quality, and that gives us a really good indication of what water quality is like overall.
So this is an average.
Yeah, rather than sort of targeting different and trying to make comparisons.
Steve, do you want to say something?
No, I'm best to stay quiet.
Chuckling away in the corner. Neil.
Mr. Chairman, looking at the one that I'm particularly interested in, which of course is the Waiora River down the bottom, are we absolutely confident with these? It's the worst case. Are we confident that we don't still have point sources on these rivers that have yet been detected, or I get more complaints, people ringing me up about that particular river with colour in it and various things. Are we confident? I mean, we're talking all about as though this is just some runoff from something, but are there still throughout the whole area undetected or not controlled point sources that are causing the problem?
So if we suspect that there are point source discharges contributing to overall E. coli loads, we can do some investigation into that with fecal source tracking, which we have done in the past at particular sites. So there'll be some places where people have consented discharges still to water. I'm not sure about the details specifically there, but if we have illegal or unconsented discharges that aren't permitted activities, then we can go and follow up with further investigations as well.
So it just seems that this particular one does seem to deteriorate at certain points. And there has been, shall we say, large industries that have been contributors in the past. and I'm not absolutely confident that they're not still in some way contributing to those things. And are you actually looking at those sorts of places to see?
Can I just suggest
So
that
just
you
maybe-
take those particular ones up with officers?
So, by way of a comment to address that, we have monitoring programs in all those places you're talking about. We do more monitoring than our colleagues in other regional councils. We've got a pretty fair idea about what's going on. We also have people that ring us up, farming neighbours ring us up and say, Fred McClay down the road is doing this.
Are you?
when I'm not doing fitness. Anyway, so we have a system, a trust-based system where people can ring up and we will investigate. So I'm pretty certain there won't be some major polluters out there, because the other element is, and you see it with enforcement action we take, the penalties are significant and they change people's behaviour. So.
I would just reiterate that if you are fielding phone calls like that, just
pass
them on to.
And you will know, Mr. McClay will be able to tell you that I do in every case.
Very good.
Rational phone calls. We want the rational ones.
Okay, we're just going to keep moving.
Can I just ask one more question, please?
Yes.
With these sites that are much higher, does that trigger any additional testing, or is it just Tuesday and that's it? Or if you see a spike in a river that's not normally high, does that trigger an action?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So yeah, if we saw something that was unusual for that particular river or beach site, so say we had a really high exceedance in a beach that wasn't influenced by a river, then yes, we would do further monitoring and investigate and keep an eye on those results.
Thanks.
Just a quick one from me. I also had a question on long-term trend, which is great. In that context, that graph on page 23, long-term grades, I might be a bit slow, but can you explain what that means?
So
yeah, go ahead. I mean, that is 3 to 5 years or 3 years on those three indicators across all sites?
yes, through you, Chair. So that's based on all those sites we monitor for those things, and that is part of NPSFM requirements and using national guidelines to determine that. So yeah, for E. coli, that's based on all the freshwater sites, whereas planktonic cyanobacteria, that's only using those 7 lakes that we monitor that for.
Right, thank you.
Through you, Chair. So that's I guess that's compiling the 3 years of data for those sites, for those parameters. But it's I guess it's a grade, or it's a static snapshot of how those sites grade. It's not a trend analysis.
Doesn't give us a trend, does it?
No, we need a little bit more data to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I'm really grateful for all of the reports that we have today. It gave me a lot of pause for consideration. And I guess one of the things that occurred to me was that old phrase, you reap what you sow. And I think what we're witnessing here are policy decisions perhaps a generation ago. And what we will be witnessing, or our mokopuna will be witnessing, will be whatever the policies that we establish today. So if we want better, fresher water, I guess it comes back to whatever the policies we set will be. And if we don't, well, they will reap whatever we leave behind. So I'm grateful for the reports, because it really got home the message for me about we're the ones responsible for what our mokopuna are going to inherit.
So you're not going to feed the ducks?
I don't.
Oh,
I try to eat them.
You need to eat more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Peter. And on that note, we're going to move on. So the recommendations, they're on page 14. Peter, would you like to move it? You would, thank you. And a second, Emily, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're on to item number 6, freshwater micro invertebrate state of environment monitoring report.
So I'll welcome Fern Kumaroa, who is our freshwater scientist for the sits with Brooke and Brooke's team, and Bern's going to talk to us about macroinvertebrate reporting. She's managed to produce a fairly large technical document and done a fantastic job.
Thank you. Yeah, so our freshwater macroinvertebrate fauna are one of the attributes the council monitors under the State of Environment Monitoring Program. They are recognised globally as sub-indicators of stream ecosystem health because they're sensitive to changes in water quality, flow and habitat, and so they're really good indicators of upstream habitat degradation and potential pollution. So I'll just be providing an overview of the most recent freshwater macroinvertebrate report, which covers 4 years between 2019 and 2023, which was 2019 was when the last invertebrate report was released. So we monitor 67 sites annually between February and April, and we go to just one site and take a sample of invertebrates and we get that processed. Previously, the council's macroinvertebrate state and trends have been analysed and reported on using regionally derived tolerance values and bands based on Taranaki experience. And we use these to report on the Macroinvertebrate Community Index, or the MCI. I will be referring to these as TRC MCI scores or regionally derived scores. That is carried on into this report, but in addition to this, we have also included an assessment of the council's macroinvertebrate data against the attributes set out in the NPSFM. So the MCI, the semi-quantitative macroinvertebrate community index, and the average score per metric. So going into regionally derived results, if you can refer to page 26 of the meeting agenda, there's a map illustrating the current results from the 2022 to 23 monitoring year. The council reported on at least one site in each health band, which ranges from very poor to excellent, but the majority of sites, so 45 sites or 70% were either in good or fair condition. The results indicated a gradual decline in invertebrate health in a downstream direction of the ring plain streams. So sites classified as excellent were predominantly around or within the border of Te Papakura or Taranaki, and sites scoring fair or lower were towards the coast. In addition to the state, we also completed a trend analysis using the council's macroinvertebrate data, and this summarises both the long-term trends, which covers the entire 28 years of monitoring we've done for macroinvertebrates, as well as the last 10 years, so 2013 to 2023. And I'll just refer to these as long-term and short-term trends, and these can be referred to on pages 27 and 28. But to summarise, for long-term trends, so since the 1995, 3/4 of sites had improving trends, while 14% of sites had shown some degradation. But in contrast, short-term trends were quite different and indicated that only in the last 10 years, 34.5% of sites were improving, while 31% were degrading. And additionally, I would like to draw your attention to page 90 of the agenda. That is a rolling graph of MCI trends over the entire monitoring period. We found that there was a big spike in decreasing trends in 2020, but since then has lowered, and we're now finding a more even proportion of trends among 67 sites. But following that, I would just like to highlight that the scope of the report is just reporting on state and trend of our current sites that we monitor, but we would like to have a more comprehensive grasp on the relevant variables that are driving the invertebrate health and how these may interact. We expect that drivers may be interacting and that in some cases they may be site-specific. So we are currently commissioning some work to assess drivers in Taranaki using council's macroinvertebrate data, and this will be used to inform policy implementation and future state of environment reporting. But quickly back to results, a final analysis looking at the NPSFM attributes. Out of the 67 sites, we've found that for MCI, 78% of sites are above the national bottom line, while 22% of sites have fallen into D band. For SQMCI, 61% of sites were above the national bottom line, while 39% of sites fell below into D band. And for ASPM, 88% of sites were above the national bottom line, but 12% of sites fell into D band.
So we can see that the SQMCI attribute is the most pronounced indication of poor water quality, with the most sites in D band, and this takes into account both taxa presence and abundance. So that's the most sensitive out of the three attributes. So we're more likely to see a change there before we see a change in the other two attributes.
Which one was this? Sorry?
The SQMCI. And yeah, to wrap things up, we have just completed the most recent macroinvertebrate monitoring this year. It finished in April, and the samples are currently being processed, hopefully ready to report, and the next monitoring season will begin in February 2025. Thank you. I'll take the rest as read, and I'm happy to open up for questions.
Thank you. I'll just noting on our previous conversation how good it is with this one to have that long-term data and to be able to see those trends. It's just completes the picture.
It does. Yeah, I agree.
Anybody want
to? Thanks for that very good overview of what's quite complicated and good labeling of what things are. The graph on page 90, that hump, what do you think caused that, or the drivers? I know it's hard to say. What would be your guesses?
Through council, I'm not entirely sure at this point, just because there are so many particular things. It could be.
It's not flow or weather or.
We couldn't say at this stage. So hopefully the work that we do, delving into that data a little bit more and looking at drivers will help tease that out. It's there are all sorts of things that can drive communities and stream, weather, flow, particular conditions at the time, contaminants, and how they interact together is important in that, piecing that together too. There's some work that other councils have done with NIWA looking at drivers, and there's some information that's starting to come to the fore around that that's helpful, but we need to have a look specifically at our data and what's happening in Taranaki and see what we can tease out from that.
Yeah, if I could add to that, yeah, we have currently just collated a big spreadsheet of all of what we consider could be affecting it. So whether we collect temperature, flows, habitat data, and that's going to be part of the work that we're commissioning, and hopefully they will be able to bring together all the ideas into what is driving the results. As I said, some of the results could be site specific, but we do expect a lot of those might be interacting with each other.
Yeah, because I guess we've got all these different attributes in the MPSFM, and MCI seems to be the one thing that brings everything together to be a really good ecosystem health. But when you see a random hump that we don't know what causes it or why, it's quite hard to go, well, is what we're doing making a difference? Are we going in the right direction? So I think it would be really useful knowing that information.
Thank you, Chair. Great report. I really enjoyed reading the whole thing. But I'm not much of a scientist, but it was wonderful. I had a question around the 5-year trends look more positive than the 10-year trends. Are there any thoughts around?
Do you mean short term or long term?
I think the long term trends.
So the long term are the full, so 1995 to 2023, and then we also do the short term, which is 2013 to 2023.
Yeah, the short term trends, and the short term trends, the 5-year trends look to be more positive and improving, whereas the 10-year trends are more negative and degrading. I was just wondering, is there any kind of reason for that? Is there any ideas?
Through you, Chair, hopefully this report that we're commissioning will go to answer that. With the trends, it does look at take all the data into consideration, so it will give an insight into not only what's happening in the past 5 years as an example, but everything before that, because that's all taking all of it into account. So hopefully we can commission this work and then we'll piece it together and hopefully provide a lot more insight.
I said one more question, and that is that I'm aware that Simon Upton, as the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, has called for there being a lot more monitoring sites. And while 67 seems like a lot, I was just wondering, is there any thoughts around from the science team about what that kind of level would look like that was really first class?
Sure. So it is our most monitored parameter by far, by leagues, in terms of water quality. So that's as opposed to, I think it's around 20 odd sites we now have for water quality. And we need to understand those drivers, we need to be able to link those attributes. So yes, while there are gaps in places that we think would be helpful, we need to think carefully about how we spend our community's money on monitoring.
Absolutely, I wasn't saying you should. I was just wondering, we had $1 million.
Yeah, so no, we do have some gaps, and particularly in the southern and northern parts of our region that we need to address. Absolutely. How we balance that up with the sites that we've already got is something that the team needs to work through, and then we need to work out how do we link that in better with our broader network to be able to understand those drivers and causes and things like that a little bit better. So we're just working through that at the moment.
I'm sure you've thought of it before, but there must be a use for AI somewhere down the track with this, to take all of that data and compare it with the rainfall in every single spot and all the data that we've got, and they come up with that.
It's a good project for you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to figure out what's the use of AI. That would be a great one. Neil, you've been waiting a while.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask about the southern examples which we've got for rivers in South Taranaki. I note, for example, that of the Waitotra River, the samples have been taken there are all very low, so that we've got a bad performance from those areas. Is that forestry, or it's certainly not any it's not farming, but in terms of cattle or anything? Most of those places are in pretty remote areas. You've got the Waitotra one, and you've got another brown spot further down south of Hara on one of the little streams. I just wondered if you have any guidance about what that is. I know you're not doing the Whanakura River, but down there, it wouldn't seem to be any obvious, shall we say, contamination from agriculture. So what is the problem? Is it forestry, or what is it?
Might give Brooke that question. She might be a bit more familiar with the sites.
Yeah, potentially it's related to habitat. So like the way the stream beds are often softer fine substrates, whereas the ring-fence streams, you've got cobbles and boulders, which tends to support communities that are higher in sequence. So I would say potentially
Instead, I'd probably just links back to the conversation we've been having around drivers needing to do that work to get a bit more of a effect there. But I think from memory, a lot of those sites are some of the ones that have been added more recently, as it is, so the data record's shorter, so we do.
I just wonder sometimes if in fact you indicate on these maps perhaps that there's a really serious problem, but in fact it might actually be a natural phenomenon that there's nothing absolutely to do with anybody creating it. It's just that it's a soft, muddy bottom as distinct from a hard shingle bottom.
Absolutely, I think that piece of work around drivers, it's not just around identifying issues that we might be responsible for. It's around drivers in terms of natural characteristics and everything, pulling that together to understand what's shaping these communities.
I guess just to add on to what Thomas is saying, so every site, when we do monitor, we do take a lot of that information in. So we look at what the substrate's like, we look at what the environment's like, and we do rapid habitat assessments, and that will all be feeding into that report we're doing as well. So hopefully, if it is a habitat-driven cause, that should be highlighted in those results.
We have one of those streams that's called Mangaani, which means muddy bottom, and yes, it is very.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Thank you. Over the side now, Donna, you had a question.
I was just going to ask, is temperature some of the issue between the top and the ring plane, between the top of the river to the bottom?
Potentially it is, sorry, through you, Chair. Potentially, yeah, those, I think that probably just as well as the accumulation of everything that's happening.
But some of it is water temperature, isn't it? The more sensitive ones will live in.
Potentially, which could be linked to several different things. It could just be shading, it could be discharges, wherever you may be. But yeah, that could definitely be playing in, but I can't confirm just based off that.
Emily, did you have something?
There's a couple of other ones. Just so I hadn't heard that news about more monitoring sites. So I'm going to look at more monitoring sites. I've been saying for a few years that the Western Wing Plan could do with some more, and also just thinking on that with the the sites that are chosen and when we're doing averages and that kind of thing. Do you feel like you've got a good, like a fair coverage, I guess, of the average sites for Taranaki? Like it's not skewed by having more around towns.
I can potentially try through you, Chair. We have sort of currently been looking at the site representation, specifically looking at FMUs. Majority of our sites, I think 42, if I can remember correctly, are around the ring plane, and we are lacking them in sort of the northern and east and southern sort of areas of the region. So that is potentially something that could be reviewed if I am lucky enough to get insights. Abby might be able to add a bit.
Yes, so yeah, absolutely agree. There is a gap there as well. So again, that'll be something we look at. I would say all of our network has some bias in it, and that's something that we need to work through in terms of how we minimise that going forward, and provide a bit more of a representative picture, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you for the report. We're receiving the report, noting the recommendations herein. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Neil, and seconder. Gerald, all those in favour, please, aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to our next item, temporary fishing closure, item number 7.
Thank you.
Finbar.
Through you, Chair. I'll keep this relatively brief. We're into the fund-filled submission portion of the agenda, and I'll take everything as read just to highlight the key points. So this relates to a proposal from Taranaki, an application from Taranaki, Iwi and Hapu to extend the 2-year closure along the western coast for a range of species. You'll see that the proposed submission, which I think submission shut at the end of September, recommends that the council support that application. Again, we supported the last one as well. I think in our submission, we're also looking to emphasise the importance of Fisheries New Zealand Council and Iwi Hapu all working together on the monitoring picture, so that when 2 years rolls around, we've got a really good handle on how the closure is supporting that marine life to come back. But I'll leave it there and take any questions.
Thanks, Finbar. I did read the report. It all made sense to me. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
I have a question. Thank you, through you, Chair. I was wondering, with that monitoring, will that include monitoring of the areas outside of the Rahui? So we can have an indication of, whether those sites outside the Rahui have been through the degraded
controls,
like control sites, yes.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair, I would say to be determined. It would be dependent on the resources available. You'd prioritise monitoring within the Rahui site, and if you had capacity left over. And I do know in the last submission we made, we also suggested Fisheries New Zealand engage with iwi and Hapu outside that area as well, to talk with them about their potential interests and issues they might be facing. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Bonita.
Well, kia ora. I definitely support this paper, support the recommendations, and just in reflection too, thinking about when Taranaki Iwi came to the chamber to first talk about this Rahui, and I just want to acknowledge a whai friend, Davey, who has since passed on since this work was implemented, and all those others who have been a part of this really important mahi. So kia ora, everybody.
Thank you. Donna?
Mine was just that it was really good that we look at a strategy going forward, that this doesn't happen again, that we have a plan.
A plan?
Well, a strategy that, to ensure that we don't get to this point again.
Through you, I'm just like perhaps an education strategy, an education program, moving in 2 years' time, telling people not to take everything.
Or that it's monitored and maybe parts are closed when needed. Again, and apparently, I think it has happened in the past, hasn't it?
Through you, Chair, absolutely. So one of the things that Taranaki Iwi highlight in their application is the need for over the next 2 years to develop a solution for longer term management. And I think that's something council would be very, very keen to engage on.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for the submission. As an earlier Te Taranaki and work out with the team, yeah, we've faced like a lot of racism in the community. Like we've got a pile, like when they ordered the rahui signs, they got double. And so now we're making slowly a pile of signs that have been burnt, bulldozed, shot, backed into tractors, smashed with axes. Like it's quite a full-on environment out in the community. So having the council's support is really important. So thank you.
You're doing with those signs? Collage?
In a pile in the corner. Maybe we'll make it art exhibition.
Yeah, exactly. You could do something with it.
Yeah. Education's really important.
Yeah, that would be an interesting story for the media to pick up. They're listening. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and I know Mike, block your ears for a minute. There are obviously costs in doing this monitoring. Is there any advantage in us contributing to some of those costs to get the data back?
Through you, Chair, I would defer to Abby and the team on terms of budget availability. I think that would be something we would be keen to explore with Taranaki iwi and hopefully also Fisheries New Zealand.
Because there's obviously data there that could be beneficial to us.
And I should also say Taranaki iwi has already done, Willie was just talking about some really great work in terms of collecting that. I think it's just a matter of maybe systematizing and making sure that we can, looking forward to that longer term management strategy, getting what we need.
Thank
you.
Thanks. Is there any evidence of negative impacts on the areas south of the Rahui? I mean, I'm aware that you can collect some shellfish around the Ohawi Beach area. Are we seeing increased visitations down there? Is there any argument for extending that Rahui any further?
Through you, Chair. Thomas is waving his hand, so I might pass to him if that's all right.
No, Thomas.
It's not something we focus on in terms of our monitoring as far as our coastal monitoring program. We have installed shore surveys and things like that, but it's more the mandate of the jurisdiction of Fisheries New Zealand to be monitoring that harvesting pressure, I guess, and those behaviours. So yeah, there is a risk, obviously, of the displaced pressure to spill out on the side of where the Rahui is. But yeah, short answer is we don't have a good handle on that with the TRC.
I mean, often you hear a lot of word of mouth stuff, which I haven't heard of you leading. Yeah, you know, the Ohawi residents are pretty onto it.
Yes. Is that just well, that sort of leads me to ask, is the Rahui being policed and by whom? And people, is there any evidence that people are sort of breaking it?
Yeah, I can talk to that.
Yeah,
as
go
well.
for it.
So Ngaruahine, as far as I know, have applied for the same protection that Kauri has, and the same with Maniapoto. I'm not sure about the other, like Te Awa and Ngāti Nui Rauru. But yeah, we are seeing that whānau that used to come, you know, to both the iwi rohe and now just focusing on one, I guess. So it probably will have impacts. We've been encouraging them to do the same thing so that we have a joint course so we can do it together. I'm not sure whether it's the two. But yeah, our team's going out regularly and monitoring, but we can't approach people that expect fisheries, so we can call, like, so we're encouraging people to call hotline and fisheries can come. I think there's only 2 officers for the whole of Taranaki. Yeah.
Any further comments? Okay, there are recommendations A to D, including B, which is endorsing the submission. Could I please have a move for that? Susan, second up. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes. Okay, climate change.
Through you, Chair. Thank you again. Once again, I'll take the submission as read. Sorry, the paper is read and the submission by extension. I'll just talk through some key aspects again. So this paper combines two submissions. One is for a submission from TRC on the proposed regulatory regime for carbon capture, utilisation and storage. So that's here for your endorsement retrospectively. So the submission is shut and consulted by email. And then the other one is a noting submission, a noting recommendation regarding a submission sent in by the Taranaki Mayoral Forum on the second emissions reduction plan. So just to speak to the carbon capture, utilisation and storage, or CCUS, one first, just briefly, as it's a fairly technical area. Carbon capture, utilisation and storage. The capture part refers to kind of two predominant different technologies. One is point source capture, the most pertinent one for this region being you have an oil and gas facility and it's currently pumping carbon out into the atmosphere through a smokestack. And you install scrubbers and the things to extract that carbon from the smokestack before it hits the atmosphere. Then the other part of CCUS is direct air capture. This is far more technologically nascent and kind of there's a lot of way to go. And that is you have big fans and you suck in air from the atmosphere and you pull out the carbon, to put it rather simply. And then the question, of course, is once you've got that carbon, what do you do with it? And that's where the storage and utilisation aspects come in. Storage is predominantly, you pump it under the ground into a reservoir. And in Taranaki, that's kind of looking at, potential oil and gas reservoirs and using that as a storage location. And then the utilisation is turning that carbon dioxide into something useful, which is already done at the Kapuni plant in terms of producing carbon dioxide for a range of different industrial and food related processes, like your beer. When there was that shortage when Marsden Point shut and everyone panicked because there wasn't enough CO2 to carbonate beer in the country. So the proposed the submission basically says CCUS has the potential to be a good tool in the toolbox when it comes to climate mitigation. We kind of need everything that we can at this point, and that's reflected by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the likes of the International Energy Agency. However, the submission does note that we can't rely on CCUS, can't be used as an excuse to not do everything else that we have to do, and that includes behaviour change as well and shifting away from carbon intensive industries. And then there are some aspects of a regulatory regime that need particularly careful attention, and that's primarily around the storage aspects, monitoring and liability. So how do you ensure that stuff that you pump under the ground stays under the ground, and how do you manage that needs to stay under the ground for thousands of years, and how do you ensure that the liability of that is managed if some of it was to leak out in the future, who pays those costs? And the submission there broadly emphasises those need to be carefully managed and supports the liability regime set out in the submission document. Then just finally turning to the Emissions Reduction Plan 2 submission, so that your emissions reduction plan is essentially just the plan to how we're going to hit our climate change targets as a country. And this is a discussion document, it's not the actual full plan, it's the discussion document on the plan. And the submission from the Mayoral Forum generally goes, it's bad that we're not on track to meet our targets, and we should be on track to meet our targets, and we need to do more to do that. And it supports a range of things in that document, which is really good, but in a number of areas calls for more to be done. And that's set out in the submission. I won't repeat it all here. And then the other thing that's quite specific to Taranaki is that discussion document contains a list of everything both the Labour government and then now the current coalition government has stopped. And there is a number of things there that are very specific to Taranaki around the previous government's program to a range of support packages to help, particularly Taranaki and Southland, transition away from carbon intensive industries. And the submission basically says, we're disappointed that those programs have been scrapped, essentially. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Happy to open questions, answer any questions. I know, ominous, right? Thunder rolls in just when I open for questions.
Yeah, I have some real issues with the idea of storage sites for CO2 because we now know that there is no way. And what do you think the real projections are of only storing that CO2 short term, and what's the business model for what it can be used for in the future? Is there one?
Through you, Chair. I think in terms of the viability of long-term storage, the things I would highlight there is, I mean, it's not long-term, but we have already been doing a lot of this effectively in the region already in terms of some of the practices in the oil and gas industry today, which are very akin to what you do for carbon dioxide storage. And you've got to do some pretty detailed geological analysis, but for, you know, the likes of like the Kapuni field, from my admittedly limited understanding, that is geologically it's pretty tight. So the thing that you then need to worry about is well integrity and how you manage that so it doesn't leak out of the wells, and that's where you need to have that robust system in place. For the shorter term stuff, there's already some established uses. I know there's technological development going around, like how you can convert captured CO2 into like chunks, and then you can use those chunks for things in industry. Sorry, I can't remember any of the technical details there. But there's a lot of technological development going on in that space as well.
And is it proven technology that's been used elsewhere in the world, or?
The direct air capture stuff, still all very nascent, not really. And the economics of that one is still a big question mark. Point source capture is used throughout the world already.
For CO2?
For CO2, okay. Yeah. Admittedly, the International Energy Agency acknowledges that the adoption of that is lagging behind projections and where we kind of need it to be if we're going to hit our climate targets. But it's kind of ramping up.
Some of the main questions. The synthetic fuel use, is that just kind of like recycling it, so you use it twice instead of once?
Through you, Chair.
Synthetic fuel.
I don't know if you utilize the CO2 in synthetic fuel manufacturing.
I'm sure it's something like that.
I'm not aware, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I appreciate that submission on the sex use was changed. I guess it just doesn't go far enough for me, so I won't be supporting it. Mainly because, as Liam said, there's all this improvement technology or sort of technology, you know, like we talk about pumping things down wells. But we know now that well casings only last about 60 years, and we haven't really had that period of time to see those wells degrade and start to collapse. And the ownership of those sits on landowners now, not those companies, because we didn't sort out decommissioning rules back in the day. We still haven't. But yeah, I think what I want to really talk about today is so not so much as that submission, but also the mirror one, the emissions reduction one, just the general kind of attitude that's been shifting in Taranaki, especially with our mayor, Neil. It was disappointing to see that our 4 mayors put out that document the other day. Feels like we're backtracking on the whole decarbonising our economy. I mean, to go back to hoping that we can get oil and gas out of the ground when, you know, we've been trying for decades. We haven't had a decent find, I think, for 12 years. Like, we can hope that there's something there, but even if we find something, like, it's harder and harder and more expensive, and it's just a distraction and delay from actually decarbonising our economy. And then there's a bigger picture of, you know, most of our economy relies on exports and imports, and there is no plan. I've been asking various different forms, what's the plan when we can't afford fossil fuels? There is no plan. So for our farmers, you know, their entire economy is going to crash because we're not preparing for an export industry without fossil fuels. I mean, we're hoping on hydrogen, we're hoping on biofuels, but we know that ships and planes can only use 5% of their fuel as biofuel. So that's not going to get a plane or a ship going. It's just impossible engineering. The same with hydrogen, it's highly explosive. It's got issues with leaks. It's highly inefficient. It's better to use the electricity as it is rather than turning it into hydrogen and using it. It's just a waste of money and resources, and it still won't run all the ships and planes that we currently use. So, like, I've been raising this for years, and it just feels like there's a lot of, what do you call it, cognitive dissonance, sort of people not actually understanding what's coming and not having a plan. And not having a plan is really irresponsible because councillors are supposed to understand these things and protect our communities. So yeah, it's just really disappointing to see things going backwards. Like we were on a good track, and I know we can blame coalition government and all this, but when we see some of our own councillors doing this, and we see people in our community supporting the coalition governments, wanting to open up oil and gas and importing LNG into our port. But these are not solutions. These are distractions and delay tactics while we're allowing the economy basically to crash.
Thanks, Ebony. So you're not supporting that solution?
No.
Okay.
I just want people to really get your head around these issues because they're really important.
Yeah, I think everybody here is pretty well informed, self-informed, informed from other means. So we don't necessarily need to reiterate all of that right now. But Charlotte, do you want to comment on the Mayoral Forum?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Submission scene that was brought up?
Yep, everything's about finding balance, right? We're local government, we support the four well-beings. There's environmental, but there's also economic, cultural, and social. And I think we're conscious of that. I mean, the first line in the submission is the Taranaki Mayoral Forum is very concerned that the country is not on track to meet the submission targets. And in the media release we put out, we sent that loud and clear, but it's also reflective of around the pace of change and what we can do. So it's just trying to find that balance. So, and again, doing a submission that all the four councils can unite behind, I think is a powerful thing. So it's always going to find that balance between those things. So that's where the Mayoral Forum submission came from. And thanks to Finbar for his work that went into it and just talking through this.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, Barry?
Just on the, I agree with what's been said. On the economic front, even if they lift the oil gas ban, the indications are we're not going to get a big uptake. In fact, it's reduced dramatically. And we've got this in Taranaki anyway, potential crash site where gas oil is going down and we're not replacing it. So that business about the transition funding seems to be really, really important. Are we doing enough about that here in terms of what the government has taken away? Because fundamentally, 10, 15 years down the track, we face big issues, economic issues in this region.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, you're exactly right. To be perfectly frank, Taranaki has been really, we're in a spot because the previous government, the package of that support was in response to the oil and gas exploration ban. The current government has gone, we got rid of the ban, job done. Taranaki, you're fine. But you're exactly right. The chances that ban has a significant impact on the industry, not great. And I know there's other work going on in central government around that as well. But yeah, then without the support of those other programs, it does leave a void. I mean, there's still a lot of really good work going on in the region. But the reality is that money's not coming back. The government has slashed a lot of programs across them, and this was one that was probably always going to get the chop. But yeah, I mean, are the councils and doing enough to kind of support that other stuff? That's an open question. The current government has also been very clear on any new industry has to stand up on its own, be it offshore wind or hydrogen or carbon capture and storage. The economics of that are also probably maybe on a bit of an edge. And so that, yeah, I've been quite clear on that front.
Can I just ask? Sure. More of a general one. I mean, I still, agriculture, over 50% of our emissions. We're in a bit of a hole, aren't we? And I'm looking at their policies in terms of CO2 reductions, and I'm not particularly hopeful that anything there looks like even bringing agriculture into the pricing mechanism in 2030 is going to work. So you might not be able to answer this, but what's the consequence of that in terms of our obligations for climate action? Can you just
through you, Chair, I have to dust off some of my Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade knowledge. I guess internationally there is the risk of we just don't hit our international commitments, and that brings with it a whole bunch of just trade impacts potentially with our relationship with other countries, particularly the EU is looking at like climate-related border adjustments and the like, where essentially if you don't do enough to to reduce your emissions, you're going to have a higher tariff along those lines. And the government does take very seriously our international commitments, and for us to not hit them is a big deal. I can't remember the actual ramifications of that in terms of the Paris Agreement and the like, in terms of, like court action and things like that under the International Court. The other aspect of that, which I think the industry is very live to, is like the likes of Nestle and the like putting greater requirements in terms of the products that they accept to demonstrate that they are on the level as much as possible when it comes to emissions. So there's trade risks there as well, border economic ones, if we don't do enough.
So it's a double whammy for us in terms of agriculture.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Can I just say there is a huge amount happening within agriculture. And if you look at rewiring Aotearoa, there's some really good work happening there. Frontier and Nestle and the greenhouse gas pilot project, there's a huge amount happening there. The other, the greenhouse gas initiative that everybody's involved in, and there's a lot happening there as well. So yeah. So as a farmer, I'm personally involved in reducing CO2 emissions and monitoring it pretty closely annually. So we're working on efficiencies, and when we get some answers with methane, then there'll be some ways to change it. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but there is a lot of work happening.
Thank you, Donna. I was all getting a little bit doom and gloom there for a while, showing us a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, but it can also be, it's not all regulation. In other words, economic prospects with Nestle get you to do scope 3 and these kind of things. The pressure on the government, already there's changes, a whole series of changes coming through about creation of native forests. There's the reduction of developing land, putting trees on, and all these kind of things. So I think poor old Finbar is writing on the whiteboard at the present time, and he could be doing a totally different submission in 6 months' time.
Absolutely.
So you, Chair, I look forward to it.
Keeps you in job anyway.
Don't bring us all down again. Go.
Well, I don't want to bring it back up, but I just want to say 95% of dairy is exported. We don't have a plan for how to export it without fossil fuels. That's what I'm saying. 95% of dairy products need a alternative.
Let's we could take this conversation, roll it over to lunch. Actually, I think it's a good idea. Thank you, Finbar. Thank you, everybody. That brings us to a close. We have the recommendations on page 200, A to E. I will move them. Could I have a seconder? It's Neil. All those in favour, please. It's there is one.
And me.
Oh, two. Two against. That brings us to a close. That weather sounds terrible out there. You're not staying for lunch. Drive safely. Thunder and lightning. Okay. Karakia.
Bring a coat.
No. Tia uru mai, aho ora, aho ka, aho maya, kirunga, kiraro, kiroto, iwaho, riri ho, mai mai.
You and Karakia for.
No.
We need to do Karakia for Kaina. Namai.
Namai
Thank you.
Thanks, team.
I'll see you, Vanessa.
Aloha.
You're looking very very suntanned over there. Miserable here, you know. Are we coming?
La, da, 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 da.
I'll try.